Author Donna J. Jodhan presents The Christmas Box Set Number 2. If you have not yet listened to Donna's 12 Days of Christmas Box Set Number 1, then you owe it to yourself to do so. This box set is made of 12 wonderful stories for the Christmas holiday season. They are all filled with mystery, suspense, and they all have happy endings. Now, Donna presents her second 12 Days of Christmas box set, 12 stories with wild imaginings. Donna paints pictures of hope, peace, and a bright future for the world. She develops amazing stories that will warm and thrill the hearts of the listener. Sit back now and enjoy Donna's 12 stories. You can email your thoughts and feedback to Donna at donnajodhan@gmail.com. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone.
Ho, 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 everybody. I'm Donna J. Jodhan, author Donna Jodhan, also known as Detective GJ. And I'd like to welcome you to the second episode of my 12 Days of Christmas box set number 2. I recorded number 1 quite some time ago, and now I think it's time for me to record number 2 and to share it with you. I hope you had some time to enjoy my first episode, Santa's Special Christmas Sleigh. And now, it is time for me to share with you the second episode of my 12 Days of Christmas box set. This one is titled The President's Christmas Packages. I hope that everybody right now is enjoying the holiday season, Christmas holiday season, with all the goodies, packages, joy, peace, love, greetings. So let's get started with this episode, okay? And here is a description. "'Tis is the season for jolliness, peace, and love, and everything else good. And now we find that President Marco Sumner and his best friend Nicholas Gleason and their families are all working feverishly at their headquarters to put together some very interesting packages. Wonder what these packages are. Marco and Nicholas have been summoned by a friend in need to make this Christmas holiday season a very special one. Something always goes awry. Something very precious has been stolen, and replacements need to be found in a big hurry. Find out who stole the packages, and all's well that ends well. It always does. So, let's start with part 1. Marco and Nicholas preparing for Christmas. These two friends are relaxing on a comfortable bench on a late summer's twilight in one of the parks of Bobbin Square. And this is a large and beautiful complex that is owned by these two friends, where their families reside, along with many other less fortunate families. Bobbin Square is the envy of so many others globally, and Marco and Nicholas are best known for their humanitarian deeds and their revolutionary and off-the-edge inventions, and their close association to Santa Claus and his family. They're also very, very close to the worldwide Kris Kringle Foundation and to some very high-profile and very important investigative reporters. Marco and Nicholas founded Bobbin Square a few years ago, and it is a place that never sleeps. It is located in a faraway land called Nevermind. It is a beautiful land where all 4 seasons can be experienced all at the same time. At any given time, one can go swimming in the warm ocean, or they can go skiing in the mountains or play hockey on an outdoor ice rink, or they can go for walks or bike rides through lush green forests, or enjoy a peaceful fall day. Just imagine the land of Nevermind, where Bobbin Square is located. The government and people of Nevermind were only too happy and overjoyed to have Marco and Nicholas locate their Bobbin Square in their corner of the world. And thus far, they have been able to protect these 2 celebrities from the outside world and from interference and from any army trying to get into their territory. And in return, Marco and Nicholas have provided this country with some very sophisticated device designed to protect them too from anything that is evil. And the inhabitants are also very well protected. So it has been a win-win situation for everybody. The inhabitants of Nevermind benefit greatly from all of this, and they benefit from the generosity of Marco and Nicholas, and from the residents of Bobbin Square. And they too have close ties to Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, and the family. This also benefits the government of Nevermind, as they reap all of the economic benefits. And Nevermind is constantly in the eyes of the rest of the world. So these 2 friends have also brought many families to live with them in Bobbin Square. And in large part, they do this by asking persons from around the world to write to them asking why they feel they should get to live with Marco and Nicholas in Bobbin Square. The 2 friends circulated letters announcing why they were doing this, where they would be living, and how they hoped that successful applicants would have a chance to live out their dreams in harmony and to help others. The postings were circulated far and wide through social media, through other types of social channels, through social agencies, through the internet, and through so many other channels around the world. The responses were overwhelming, and they became so overwhelming, and it became even more overwhelming when they discovered who was posting all of these announcements. When it was realized that Marco and Nicholas had a great affiliation to Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, and the Claus family, and to many high-profile reporters, Marco and Nicholas developed a strong team of workers to help them carry out their missions. And while all of this was going on, Bobbin Square was built within a period of 2 years, and it took another 2 years for the entire project to be completed. And after this, it took almost another entire year to bring all successful applicants to live at Bobbin Square. By the time the first round was completed, there were about 10,000 families accepted to live in Nevermind and in Bobbin Square. Families and individuals continue to arrive at Bobbin Square to call it their home. And Marco and Nicholas hope that this will continue for many years to come. At the present time, Bobbin Square is home to thousands of refugees from the Ukraine, from Afghanistan, and from Africa. Thousands of kids from around the world with no one to call their parents also live at Bobbin Square. And thousands of less fortunate folks with nowhere to call home also live at Bobbin Square. And there are many long-term care homes for seniors at Bobbin Square, as well as modern houses. Marco and Nicholas continue to be admired greatly globally in several ways. But there are several who envy these two friends, and they continue to try and find ways to thwart Marco and Nicholas. Bobbin Square is continually filled with laughter of thousands and thousands of families, individuals, and kids. And you can find on any day folks bustling about from shop to shop and from store to store. And Bobbin Square is home to churches of all denominations. And on every street corner, you can practically find a church. And there are schools for kids, community centers for social events, sports fields and outdoor rinks, and streets where lots of restaurants and other types of entertainment centers are located. On any given day, you can find people with wheelchairs, walkers, and canes going about their business. And you can also find moms with strollers just simply moving around in parks, on streets, everywhere. And they can be seen in playgrounds as well. So it is a lovely, lovely, lovely place to live. And they enjoy the plentiful goodies of the stores and shops. But with all of this, there are some very important rules that each person needs to follow. Food must not be wasted or thrown away. Shouting or fighting must be avoided. People need to help each other. People need to be kind to each other. People need to share with each other and to participate in initiatives to help others outside of Bobbin Square. Believe it or not, these rules have helped to keep Bobbin Square on the right track. And everyone knows that as soon as Labor Day is over, it is time to get involved in the mission for this Christmas holiday. Yes, indeed. Everyone is involved in some sort of way, in some sort of mission. Rehearsing for Christmas plays and concerts, caroling activities, preparing bags and boxes filled with holiday treats and goodies for distribution to the less fortunate around the world. Marco and Nicholas are enjoying quiet time as they sit on their bench, and they are savoring some fruity drinks and munching on some snacks as they rest and relax. The evening is very pleasant, not too warm and not too cold. And Nicholas especially likes to hear the trees swaying in the breeze, to smell the mixed fragrances of the flowers, and to hear the birds call to each other as they head to their homes for the night. Marco and Nicholas agree that everything seems to be on track for this year's Christmas celebrations. And they are both hoping that they will be able to stay home with their families for this year and to celebrate with the residents of Bobbin Square. However, this is only going to be a wish, because in a few minutes, Marco and Nicholas will discover that nothing is ever the same. No, it is not. The two close friends, or brothers as they call themselves, chat easily and watch their kids play close by. The dogs Flair and Flambeau are in attendance and are having a good time. Marco is the big brother and Nicholas is the little brother. After about an hour or so, the two rise and prepare to leave. Nicholas takes out his cane, but he also takes Marco's right arm. They do not go more than 10 steps, calling to their kids as they go, when both of their cell phones begin to ring. Oh boy! They both reach for their phones at the same time as they groan in unison. After reading their messages, they groan again. So this is a scene as Marco and Nicholas prepare for something to come. Now we go to part 2. The horrible, horrible discovery. With their heads bowed, the two friends walk resolutely to Marco's home and go to his study. There, Marco uses his secure line to make a call. Before making the call, however, the two exchange thoughts. What will this mean for their own plans for this upcoming Christmas? Much as they enjoy helping friends in need, they're really looking forward to spending time with their families for this Christmas. Marco makes the call and puts Nicholas on speaker. The voice at the other end is that of Chris Kringle, and he is the president of the Chris Kringle International Foundation. This is a high-profile foundation that has been around for over 20 years now. And this foundation's mission is one that is supposed to share and share alike. Chris wants Marco and Nicholas to meet him in a very secret location as soon as possible. He will send his private jet to pick them up tomorrow, and he tells them that they should plan to be away for a few days. The friends again groan after Marco hangs up the phone, and they're also very sad whenever they are required to leave their families, especially at Christmas time. But at the same time, they're both intrigued to learn more. And Marco and Nicholas are very fortunate that both of their families are so understanding. But occasionally the kids do protest a bit. But Marco and Nicholas are teaching them to be patient, and they refer to this strategy as the put process. So the two friends pack their bags and they tell their families that they are going to be away for a few days. And the families have learned to accept these trips. They don't generally ask any questions, except to say, "Hurry home, we'll be waiting." A very nondescript car picks up Marco and Nicholas in the very early hours on the next morning, a late summer's morning. And Marco and Nicholas could feel the gentle dewdrops falling on their faces as they walk towards the car. And they can hear the early birds calling to each other. The air is fresh and cool. And both friends have been provided with thermoses of hot coffee and yummy sandwiches by their families. And even the dogs, Flair and Flambeau, have come out to see their masters off. But the cats, Mustard and Mayo, have remained asleep in their comfy baskets, all covered up and all snug. Just before entering the car, they are expertly frisked and they are instructed to slip on blindfolds before entering the car. Nicholas jokes that he does not need a blindfold because he is blind. But the driver insists that he puts on the blindfold anyway. Marco just chuckles, and the family stands and waves as the car pulls away. And the driver tells them that they are being taken to a heavily guarded runway, and the trip takes about half hour. And as the car speeds along, Marco and Nicholas sit in silence, each with their own thoughts. Kris Kringle's jet is sleek, very sleek, and security is very tight. Big burly guards surround the runway, and they watch very intently as the two friends trudge towards the jet with large suitcases in hand, and they are also loaded down with stuffed backpacks. They're not carrying just clothes, but high-powered devices, because they will need these devices to help them troubleshoot. Some of the suitcases are a bit more than heavy, and the backpacks are overstuffed, but the security detail are there to help them carry their luggage. The door of the jet is opened by another friend, Josh Reisman. He is a very high-profile investigative reporter, and he greets them and escorts them to their seats. They no sooner get seated when the captain instructs them to buckle up and get ready for takeoff. Just before the jet starts to taxi down the runway, Josh leans over and tells them to check their eye devices. So they find a message from Kris Kringle with some instructions for them when they land. The jet speeds down the runway, and the flight will last for around 3 hours. The jet makes several maneuvers so that no one would see, or anyone who happened to be watching would see, where the jet would be headed to. And the air control tower has been instructed to look out for these maneuvers. And the runway itself is located in a very, very remote area. The trip is very uneventful, with Josh snoozing and both Marco and Nicholas enjoying a very yummy breakfast. The passengers do their best to partake of it, but no one really seems to be up for eating, and the thermoses of hot coffee and yummy sandwiches remain untouched, with each friend promising to eat it later. The jet lands without any problems, and after blindfolds are once again placed over the 3 passengers, both passengers and luggage are driven to a very luxurious mansion. And Marco and Nicholas could only guess that they are now close enough to the ocean because they can smell it. And they are sure that even Josh does not know the location. As part of Kris Kringle's security, he constantly changes locations when it comes to his home. And whenever he needs to have top secret meetups with his friends and associates, he constantly changes his location. Sometimes meetings can take place in a busy downtown location, or it could take place in a chalet hidden in the mountains, or it could be at a Victorian mansion in the countryside, or it could take place in a very private cottage, securely located close to the ocean. And this is the location for today's meeting. Locations are spread across the world, and no one really knows which country they are in when they attend any of these meetings. Due to Kris Kringle's high profile, and he is known as the international citizen, and This extends to his close friends and associates. Marco and Nicholas are part of this very exclusive group, and their ties to Santa Claus and his family is yet another accolade. Chris welcomes his friends after they have taken off their masks and their suitcases and backpacks have been placed in their respective rooms. Now they are seated at a very highly polished table, and Chris has placed documents in front of Marco and Nicholas and Josh, and there are state-of-the-art laptops that display the same documents. And Nicholas has his own stack of Braille documents sitting in front of him. Everyone reads for about half hour, and this is what they learn. A huge pile of Kris Kringle's packages destined for some very special folks have been stolen. Several have either been damaged or have been destroyed. And now Chris needs help to find the missing packages, as well as to replace the damaged and destroyed ones. This is going to be a huge undertaking, because we are almost towards the end of September, and if Chris hopes to make Christmas happen for millions of folks, he needs to do the following: find the missing packages and repair the damaged and destroyed ones. Chris has always been super organized, and he is able to identify almost all of these packages, which ones have been stolen and which ones have been damaged and destroyed. The damaged and destroyed packages were found by Chris's staff in a far-off country, but the stolen ones are still missing, and it would be very helpful if these could be retrieved. There is one very important package that is missing. It's called the Master Control Package, because it is the package that is used to control the contents of all of the other packages, as well as to be able to locate them. The big problem is that Kris Kringle does not know who stole these packages and has no clue as to where they could be. And without the Master Control Package, the problem is going to be next to impossible to fix. Oh boy. Chris apologizes profusely to his guests, but minds are already racing. And Josh has some ideas that he shares with the others. Josh has done some extensive investigation beforehand, and he has narrowed the location of the stolen packages to somewhere in Siberia. He suggests some very specific locations, and Marco and Nicholas use their very powerful devices to pin down the location. But this location is very well guarded, and they soon discover that once more it is the three wise men that are behind all of this, because it is they who own this location that is located in the Siberian forest. Oh boy. After a few hours, Kris Kringle suggests that his guests retire to their rooms for some well-needed rest. But before they are allowed to retire, he serves them a sumptuous buffet meal. Salads, soups, delicious Greek and Italian dishes, light desserts, all prepared by his special chefs. Tea, coffee, and special wines from Chris's personal cellar. The guests eat and drink heartily, and then they agreed to meet at around 5 p.m. in the evening. Time for some well-deserved sleep. Marco and Nicholas chat among themselves before they retire, and Chris has provided them each with a very luxurious suite. And the two sit in the sitting room for a bit, mapping out some preliminary steps. Josh's suite is next door, and he crashes into bed as soon as he closes the door to his suite. Before retiring to their beds, however, determine that the identification of each package needs to be done, and the contents of each package needs to be carefully noted. And it does help that Chris's staff has been able to help find the damaged and destroyed ones. However, the problem still remains that they need to find the master package, or to replicate it in some way, shape, or form. Marco and Nicholas will have their work cut out for them, and they know this as they both drift into somewhat restless slumber. The fresh ocean breeze and the waves rolling against the shore all help to make slumber relaxing for everybody. So, this is a scene as the two friends rest and relax and go into slumber, and Josh is in bed, fast asleep. Part 3. Mobilizing the team. The three wise men have been fully prepared for some sort of rescue mission by Kris Kringle and his team. And this is why they chose this particular location, a thick, remote forest located in Siberia. And they have installed satellites that patrol overhead, and they are capable of telling the three wise men when intruders are approaching from about 100 miles distance. These rogue men have somehow managed to secure assistance from the Russians, because both the wise men and the Russians have sworn to do everything and anything in their power to destroy anyone who is associated with Santa Claus. And their most precious mission would be to permanently put Santa Claus out of commission. This facility is also guarded by several large, fierce dogs, and they are constantly patrolling the grounds, and they have been trained to kill anyone who enters the grounds. These dogs are especially fed with very special foods to help them keep up their energy and to sharpen their senses. And without this food, they cannot perform their duties. The three wise men were extremely lucky when they were able to steal the master package from the Kris Kringle, and they had done this from right under Chris's nose. How they did this, only they would know. They had to pay a lot of money to get someone from inside of Chris's circle to procure the precious package. And even at that, they had to find a way to bring the package out of Chris's office and then to this present location. The three wise men had been able to find persons who were willing to help for a very, very high price. But it was all worth it to them, because now they honestly felt that they had the best chance of destroying not just Kris Kringle, but also to bring down Santa, who they were very sure would jump in to help Kris Kringle. And they also felt that they could bring down Marco and Nicholas because they were very sure that Chris would be calling on Marco and Nicholas to help out as well. So the master control package was safely and securely hidden at this location in this very remote forest. And the three wise men felt that they had installed the most modern technology to help them keep a few steps ahead of Kris Kringle and his team. With Josh's help, Marco and Nicholas had been able to discover a few very important facts, and they had read all of this in the files that Kris had shared with them before lunch. They knew the exact location of where the three wise men were. They knew about the satellites and the dogs, but they needed a way to penetrate the forest and then the complex of the three wise men. And most of all, they needed a way to locate the master control package that was located at the complex of the three wise men. So that was it. This is what was happening. And now we go to part 4. The secret and dangerous plan. It is now day 2 as Marco and Nicholas start their work early in the day. And they are sitting on the beach in lounge chairs with their laptops in front of them on very sturdy tables. They are heavily guarded by Chris's guards, and the two friends manage to have a very quick swim in the cool ocean before starting work. And as Josh and Kris take care of other business in the chalet, these two friends go to work to develop a very cunning plan. One that is going to be secret and dangerous. First, Nicholas has managed to locate the specs to the master control package, and he is confident that he can either replicate it or develop a device to track it, because it was Nicholas who had originally developed the master control package some time ago, and Marco had tested it to ensure full functionality. The two friends had somehow forgotten that this had all been done, and it was Josh who had reminded them. This is an excellent start. Nicholas is able to print out the initial specs in Braille, and he is very pleased that he is able to do this. He is constantly telling Marco that the best way for him to work is to have his important papers sitting in Braille in front of him so that he can touch and think. He uses his Braille display along with hard copy Braille documents, as Kris has remembered to install a Braille printer for Nicholas. So Nicholas has started on this task, bearing in mind that if he was lucky enough to replicate the master control package or to develop a device to track it, but the three wise men must know that he had not succeeded in doing so. And this meant that he needed to use vibration technology instead of sound to do all of his testing, so that no one would know what was going on. Nicholas removes his high-powered devices from his specially made suitcase, and Chris's guards help him to set it up on adjoining tables. They make sure to ensure that he is set up in a very comfortable workstation on the beach, with camouflage overhead and walls at his back, specially made walls, and these are temporary back walls that are meant to keep unwanted insects and other things out. the door to Nicholas's workstation is left open so that Nicholas could call for help if he needs. Nicholas goes to work, and every so often he can be heard uttering phrases such as bloody hell, quote, bingo, quote, not so fast, critters. These are the phrases that punctuated the air as Nicholas worked. While Nicholas works, Marco does what he does best. We're searching the internet for facts and developing strategies. Chris's guards have set Marco up with very fast Wi-Fi connections, and they set up a very fancy workstation for Marco. And with head bowed, Marco goes to work. Marco is able to obtain a hidden map of the forest, and next he discovers some of the very important food that he can use to immobilize those dogs. Very, very lucky break. Then, with a very interesting plan, he comes up with a way to bar the satellites from seeing what is going on, so that the three wise men would not be able to see any of the images. But this part of the plan would call for a very tight timeline, because there is a time limit on how long these satellites could be immobilized. If they are lucky to gain entry to the house, they would then need to find a way to immobilize the three wise men and their staff, and then to have sufficient time to find what they are looking for, mainly the master control package and the other stolen packages. But it is important to get some sort of indication as to how many staff there are in the house, along with the size of the house and the layout of the house. Marco and Nicholas have come up with a very, very cunning plan. And while all this is going on, Kris Kringle makes sure that his guests are very well fed and serves up another very yummy meal. Breakfast that Marco and Nicholas eagerly devoured this time. And it is only during breakfast that Marco remembers the turbises of hot coffee and yummy sandwiches that the families gave to them. Oh boy. But Kris laughs when Marco tells him this, and tells Marco and Nicholas that the coffee and sandwiches have already been devoured by his kitchen staff, and they ate and drank with much gusto. Aha! Work on the beach continues throughout the day. Marco and Nicholas pause several times during the day to take short swims in the ocean and to replenish their tummies with Chris's special food, because it's all been prepared by Chris's kitchen staff, and they are only too willing and eager to show off their culinary skills to Chris's guests. By nightfall, Marco and Nicholas inform Kris and Josh that they have developed a plan, and Kris is extremely relieved because he has put all of his faith in Marco and Nicholas that they would be able to solve this big problem. Workstations are dismantled, one more swim for everyone, and then it's indoors for another meal and games of backgammon, chess, and other types of board games. And Kris reminds Marco and Nicholas to call their families on his secure lines. The families are very happy to hear from Marco and Nicholas, and the kids have all kinds of questions for their dads. Little Nick would like to know what his dad, Marco, is going to bring home for him. Scotty wants to know where his dad is. And Shay begins to cry and wants her dad to come home tonight. Oh boy. Nicholas's kids, however, Tristan and Creason, are much younger and are just very happy to hear their papa's voice. He tells them that he will bring home some surprises for them. They are happy, and soon after talking to their wives, it is time to hang up. Both Marco and Nicholas are always so filled with guilty every time they leave their families. But their wives, Chelsea and Jane, are extremely understanding and very supportive. So the night is relaxing and very, very easygoing for the four friends. After dinner, they play their games, drink some wine, and share stories. And most of all, the secret plan is unveiled. And with a few minor changes, it is now ready for action. But these four friends, or generals as they are often referred to, realize only too well that time is of the essence. And if the plan is to be successful, the timeline must be met. Time to go off to bed, as tomorrow will be the final day for Marco, Nicholas, and Josh to be at Chris's chalet. At least this is the plan. Just before the four start to leave the room, Chris's phone rings and he picks it up. He has been waiting for this call. Santa's booming voice comes over the loudspeaker, and it fills the room with robustness. The conversation starts off on a positive footing, and then Santa promises the following: to replace the destroyed and damaged packages, and to provide support for this mission by sending along his very special team: Reindeer Frosty and Misty, Snowbirds Snowcone and Snowflake, Dolphins Sea Jade and Sequin, and Lambs Rainbow and Raindrop. These are all members of Santa's very, very special team. They always help Santa to ensure that messages are sent and received very securely, and above all, they carry out very top secret and special missions for Santa. Santa also adds that his two top special mermaids, Jamie and Mallory, are also stationed and waiting to help out. And they are stationed all around the world, but their location is known only to Santa and Mrs. Claus. Chris is extremely grateful for Santa's help, and Marco and Nicholas nudge each other with excitement. And Santa's team will be a very powerful addition. Josh is a bit bewildered at hearing this all, because he's not very familiar with Santa's special team: snowbirds, reindeer, dolphins, lambs, and mermaids. But he is trusting, very trusting. So all is well. Santa's team will arrive tomorrow by special flights. So Marco and Nicholas and Josh will have to spend one more day at Chris's chalet. And they have mixed feelings about this. One more day away from their families, but one more day to enjoy the ocean. And that is how things are at the present time. Part 5. Mission at Nightfall. The special team arrive on the following day and spend no time getting down to work. The reindeer and the lambs will handle the forest, the snowbirds will handle the satellites, and the dolphins have something very dangerous and exciting to do. The date is chosen and the time is carefully carved out. No time like the present for the mission to commence. Marco, Nicholas, and Josh are flown back to their homes that night under very heavy guard. And the special team remain behind to start taking care of business. Chris will oversee this part of the mission and Santa will support. And the night is chosen based on the moon's position, and the moon is cooperating. But they know that the moon will only remain hidden for no more than 2 hours. And the snowbirds also know that their time is very tight. Lambs and reindeer work together to locate a path to the house. And at the same time, the snowbirds and their team take careful aim at the satellites overhead. And they do a masterful job at blocking these satellites. It is only hours later that the three wise men and their team have discovered that there has been a blocking of the satellites. When the signal is received from the snowbirds that the satellites have been blocked and that the reindeers and lambs have confirmed that all of this is in place for them, the next phase is ready to begin. Reindeer and lambs feed special food to those huge burly guard dogs. And soon enough, these dogs fall into a deep sleep. Then the reindeer and the lambs quickly disable the alarm systems. That they have been able to do so with instructions that were given to them by Marco and Nicholas. But now the real work needs to take place. First, the lambs and the reindeer move swiftly from room to room, spraying each room as they go along, and then using the special device developed by Nicholas, they are able to locate the master control package. Then they next use the device to locate the stolen packages. Now, the reindeer and the lambs have had to make sure that everyone in the house has been immobilized in order for this project to be successful. But the luck was not that complete after all. Almost everyone had been taken care of. Reindeer and lambs kept checking their watches, while the snowbirds did the same. Time had started to run out and the special team was only too aware of it. Oh boy. They had managed to load all of the stolen packages and the master control package onto special sleighs provided by Santa. And Frosty had just picked up the master control package and slung it onto his shoulder when an alarm bell began to sound. Oh boy. Oh no. It was time for the team to get out. The snowbirds saw what was about to happen, and they watched helplessly as the reindeer and lambs came running out of the house. Some of the team were in their sleighs, doing their best to pack these packages, while others were busy picking up fallen packages and doing their best to get organized. Mayhem, maybe? Panic, maybe? This was the scene. And now we go to part 6, the counter-strike. The bells had begun to ring when one of the guards who had not been completely knocked out saw the reindeer and the lambs entering the house. At first he thought that he had been hallucinating. What were reindeer and lambs doing in the house? Then, a few minutes later, when he saw the lambs and the reindeer riding on the sleighs loaded with packages towards the exit of the house, they became even more confused. Reindeers, lambs, sleighs, and packages? What was going on? He could not understand what was happening. So he decided to pull the alarm bell. And As he struggled to his feet, he began to shout for help. At first, the poor guard was bewildered when he realized that no one was responding to his call. The dogs were not moving, and those inside seemed to be knocked out. And as time was running out more quickly, the lambs and the reindeer realized it only too well. They had begun to run, and then Frosty had dropped the package, and he had turned around to pick it up. But the guard, who had pulled the alarm bell, was faster and had picked up the package. But this time the guard had begun to understand what was going on. He understood that someone was trying to take the master control package, and he felt that the best alternative would be to destroy the master control package. And if he was able to do so, he could stop the intruders from taking the stolen packages, because he knew that no one could really help him at this time. The stolen packages would be useless without the master control package. It was the least that this poor guard could do: destroy the master control package and then use his own device to stop the intruders from leaving the house. And he could do this by locking the main gates and then call in reserves to help. It was worth a try, wasn't it? And if it was successful, he knew that his bosses, the three wise men, would reward him handsomely. But Misty, who had seen when Frosty had dropped the package, she pulled out her bottle of spray, and she had sprayed the guard, who then dropped to the ground, releasing the master control package. But the reindeer and lambs were not yet out of the woods. Oh no, Frosty had managed to retrieve the package and had also managed to get the lambs and reindeer reorganized. But Frosty had been injured because he had been hit by a missile from the guard as he was falling. And he had been hit in the right eye, and this blinded him in the right eye. Oh boy. But Frosty, while falling to the ground and being injured, had managed to send an SOS message to the snow cone and snowflake and to Santa. They needed to know what to do. Misty had begun to cry as she helped Frosty to his feet, and the other reindeer had seen what had happened and had rallied around, and the snowbirds had also witnessed what had happened, but they did not see when Frosty had been hit in his right eye. The two lead lambs, Raindrop and Rainbow, had managed to tie up the guard, and they had had the presence of mind to shut off the alarm bell. But, nevertheless, time for escaping was quickly running out. The lambs were extremely brave and had helped to gather most of the smaller stolen packages. Santa had been awakened by the phone ringing on his night table. He had picked it up, praying as he did so. Santa listened intently, and soon he was springing into action. He gave specific instructions to Snowcone and Snowflake, and for the next hour he pasted the floor of his office. And he even managed to waken Mrs. Claus, and he had told her everything. And together they had waited for word from Snowcone and Snowflake. This was the scene as it was happening. And here we are at part 7 of our story for today. And I hope that everybody is enjoying it as much as I am enjoying it, bringing it to you. And let's get on with our business here, okay? Part 7, Kids and Soldiers. Santa first enacted his instant travel system and woke a small group of his senior kids in his special Santa school. And he had established this school a few years ago for special kids who had responded to his request, who had wanted to work with him. And these kids were from all around the world. This school continued to train the kids to carry out special missions on behalf of Santa, whenever Santa had required or requested them to do so. And it did not matter whether or not it was Christmas, because Santa always had missions to be accomplished throughout the year. And this is where these kids came in. This school had turned out to be a resounding success because both Santa, Mrs. Claus, and Santa's reindeer had been involved in training the kids as how to be good persons. And they had trained them as to how to be kind, caring, and generous to everyone else around them. In addition, they learned how to use many of Santa's specially developed devices. And they also learned many of the reindeer's tricks, such as how to drive a sleigh, play the games of the reindeer, and how to sing. So they were well trained, these special kids. They usually started school in September and stayed about for a year, but then they returned to their homes after this. And the trick of this is that their memories were usually erased before they returned to their homes, or they were made foggy so that they could not really remember what they learned at Santa's special school. And Santa did this so that they could not really tell anyone about what went on at Santa's special school. Many of the kids were always very sad to leave. But Santa had to tell them that other kids needed to take their place and to learn and do the same things that they did, and to be given a chance as they were. Okay? Kids on this night dressed quickly in their invisible suits. Next, they strapped on backpacks with special devices. The backpacks were loaded with specially made devices. They strapped them on their backs, and Santa then gave them the order to take off. And within 3 minutes, they were touching down outside the gates of the house of the 3 wise men. Santa's top reindeer, Rudolph, took charge of this group, and his task was to make sure that they followed Santa's task to the T. And after they had landed, Rudolph waited with them for further instructions. When Snow Cone had confirmed to Santa that the kids had arrived, Santa then sent some of his top-notch soldiers to stand over everybody to ensure that everything was going well. And their mission was to restore or recover the packages. And the packages were already recovered, but Santa wanted to make sure that the packages in the sleighs that were recovered earlier were guarded very, very carefully. They had used Santa's instant travel system, just like the kids had done. So everybody had used Santa's instant travel system, from reindeer, lambs, everybody, soldiers, and the kids, to snowbirds and everybody else. And they did this in order to get to the house quickly. And the next few minutes would determine whether or not this mission will be successful. Everybody's fingers and toes were crossed. Santa had already given instructions to Snowcone as to what would be done next, and using his emergency line, he prompted the snowbirds along. Upon Snowcone and his group began to blow their high-pitched whistles, and this was done in order to confuse the security systems around the house. The kids then followed suit, blowing their whistles, and soon the security systems around the house were all confused. Next, the soldiers helped the lambs and reindeer to launch their sleighs, and soon all were safely airborne. Then they were speeding towards the direction of Snowcone and his team. Soon they would rendezvous with CJ and Sequin and their group of dolphins, and their job was to unload the sleighs onto their very sleek and safe, onto their seaborne sleighs. So the transfer would take place from the original sleighs to the seaborne sleighs. And then the seaborne sleighs would transport the precious cargo back to Chris's mansion. Santa had sent an encrypted message through CJ to Chris, and Chris had waited on the beach anxiously with his guards for the sleighs to arrive. Chris was very familiar with Santa's special messengers. Snowcone and Snowflake, and the dolphins, CJ and Sequin, all went very smoothly. And now, the Master Control package, along with all of the other rescued package, were safely back with Chris. Chris used CJ to send confirmation to Santa that all was well. But before leaving the house of the three wise men, something else had to be done. Kids, Rudolph, and soldiers had something else to do. Kids and soldiers unpacked their bulky backpacks and took the contents into the house. They scattered the replacement packages that they had brought with them around the house, and then it was time to leave. Some of the persons in the house were already starting to stir, and some of the dogs could be heard starting to move and howl. It was time to leave. Oh boy. Kids and soldiers readjusted their invisible suits, lined up in formation, and then they started to climb towards the snowbirds, who were waiting anxiously for them. There was one horrifying moment when one of the dogs seemed to have caught one of the kids by the leg as they were leaving, and he had caught them by the leg of his invisible suit. But a quick-thinking Rudolph had managed to take care of business by offering a piece of meat to the dog from his backpack, and the dog ate it. But, of course, the kid had been very scared, but Rudolph had managed to calm him down and had helped him to readjust his invisible suit. That was the scene as it happened. Part 8. Santa lends a hand. Now it was time for Santa to pull everything together. And here is where his two top mermaids and their team was drawn into action. All of the packages were now back in Santa's care, and they are stored in his massive underground storage facilities. They have been checked and rechecked to ensure that everything has been accounted for, and there is no room for error. Snowbird, Snowcone, and Snowflake and their team have returned to their stations, but they are on standby. And the same it is for Sequin and CJ and their dolphins. They too have returned to their stations, and they are on standby, as well as the lambs Rainbow and Raindrop. And Frosty and his team have returned to their base as well. Okay, so everybody is back to base. and they are now resting up with Rudolph and the gang. And they are all awaiting Santa's next instructions. Now it is time for the big man to pull it all together. And he needs to make sure that the bad guys remain out of commission until all of the packages have been safely delivered. What a big job! Here is where his two top mermaids, Jamie and Mallory, have been brought into action. First, Jamie and Mallory arrived at the house of the three wise men, and they took their route via sea. They spent some time reconnoitering the house and discovered that there was much confusion, gnashing of teeth, and running around by everyone. The three wise men could be seen arguing and blaming each other for what has happened, and the guards were doing the same. The dogs were sauntering around, looking out of sorts. So now it was time for Jamie and Mallory to go into action. First, they used their special whistles to summon their team, and next they assembled underwater, waiting for further instructions. At a signal from Jamie, the team undressed from their original clothes and put on special clothes for a special event. These were special garments. They each combed their hair into very, very stylish hairstyles, and then they affixed most beautiful jewelry never seen before to their necks, ears, and wrists, and fingers, of course. Then they slipped on their special land shoes, and off they were. Jamie and Mallory walked up and down the line of mermaids to ensure that everyone was fully dressed as per the instructions that needed to be followed. And they put on the finishing touches. Half of the mermaids received a shiny new harp, while the others received beautiful violins. Jamie and Mallory then slipped on their own attire, and they were ready for business. And they also picked up their instruments as they completed their checklist. Now it was time to move. The team moved softly and quickly to the edge of the property, and they used their instruments to emit high-pitched sounds in order to immobilize the guard dogs. And then they sent the dogs into dreamland by spraying them with their mermaid mixture. They then used their instruments and their special mermaid mixture to immobilize the guards. And now for the next few hours, they were going to give the three wise men and their household a performance of their lives. And it is during these hours, while the three wise men were being immobilized, that Santa and his team would deliver their packages to special folks around the world. It is now Christmas Eve, and the time is right for these special deliveries to take place. Deliveries to so many special folks around the world. Everything is in place, and now it is time for Jamie and Mallory and their team of mermaids to do their thing. And as the snowbirds watch from above and the dolphins look on from the sea, Jamie and Mallory and their team of mermaids enter the house, and they begin their live performance. As it turned out, neither the dogs or the guards needed to be sprayed. The mermaids mesmerized everyone with their singing, their dancing, and their acting. No one moved for the next few hours as these mermaids meticulously performed their concert. The three wise men sat with their mouths wide open and unable to move. The guards slept, and in their dreams they heard the mermaids performing. The dogs too slumbered and were paralyzed as they listened to the mermaids. Much later, Santa and Mrs. Claus and Marco and Nicholas would share that this was a sight absolutely to behold, because everyone could not believe their eyes and their ears. And this is why Santa had called his two top mermaids and their team into action. And this was something that Santa and Mrs. Claus had never shared with anyone else. The skills and prowesses of his two top mermaids and their team. Jamie and Mallory had also been used for very special missions whenever needed. Santa and his special team had much to do. First, they busied themselves loading up numerous sleighs, and then Santa assigned various reindeer to drive the various sleighs. He also brought in Kris Kringle from his post, Joss Reisman from his location, and Marco and Nicholas from their listening stations. Then he made sure that all of his communication channels were open and secure. And then the show was ready to begin. It goes without saying that everyone was on full alert and at the top of their game. Everyone was on their toes, and Santa made it possible for everyone to see and listen in to the mermaids' performance. And the mermaids did not disappoint. Oh boy. They sang beautifully. They played magnificently. They danced superbly. Oh boy. Jamie and Mallory and their team of mermaids practically outdid themselves. And to the entire household, they looked like fairies and angels. Their voices were as pure as those of angels. Their instruments sounded like nothing heard before. And their dancing wowed everyone. Simply magical. They had yummy treats for everyone. Bags loaded with treats never tasted like this before. And they even distributed some very special devices, courtesy of Marco and Nicholas, devices that were specially equipped with special tracking chips so that Santa could keep track of every household member and every guard. And the three wise men never ever guessed this. And that was the scene as it happened. And now on to part 9. Very special deliveries. Santa's sleighs spread out across a starlit night, and at a signal from Santa they took off. They traveled quickly and quietly in all directions, and to the one looking up at the sky, nothing would have looked out of place. The sleighs were well spread out and looked just like giant jumbo jets. They left in intervals of 3 minutes and in groups of 3. They were well camouflaged, and Santa's system was well oiled and designed to avoid detection from anyone. Not even the NORAD folks could have detected these giant sleighs. Santa stood and waited until all of the sleighs were airborne and out of sight, and there were practically hundreds of thousands of these special Santa sleighs in the skies above his master complex. And then Mrs. Claus went into their massive kitchen and sat at their huge kitchen table, and from there they monitored everything until it was all over. Santa and Mrs. Claus watched with much delight as Jamie and Mallory, as the mermaids and their team, gave the performance of their lives. And he knew that Jamie and Mallory were fully equipped to see what was going on with regard to the progress of the sleighs, and that they would not end their performance until he had given them the signal to do so. Santa and Mrs. Claus enjoyed yummy goodies baked by their staff. And as they monitored what the progress that was going on. The staff came in and joined them, and Santa invited his students to also join them in the kitchen, and they too entered and joined. There were delicious Christmas cookies, slices of yummy fruit cake, and mince pies, among other things. Cups of hot cocoa, hot tea drinks, and so much more. And there was apple cider as well. Most of the time, however, the students were so engrossed with what was going on the monitors that they even forgot to eat and drink. And several times Santa and Mrs. Claus had to remind them that they needed to eat and drink. The sleighs traveled at top speed, so zigzagging along their path so as to confuse everyone as to what was going on. The reindeer checked their instructions and rechecked their instructions to make sure that everything was on cue. And they also checked their packages several times. No time this night for any sort of air games, air acrobats, or anything else. No time to play catch with the stars, but they waved to them as they drove by. The drivers were very intent on reaching their locations. And the parcel droppers were also ready to do their bit. Everyone had to be on pinpoint when reaching their targets. And as those little kids in the Ukraine slept fitfully, dreaming of when next they would hear those Russian missiles dropping, or anything else that was war-related, Santa's elves came in and silently left toys and goodies for these war-torn little kids. There were all kinds of clothes, electronic games, and toys, and yummy goodies for these little ones. Their beds were full or filled to overflowing with tons of bulging packages. Some of these packages were even bursting at the seams, and other parcels were left on the floors next to their beds. And some of those elves even entered basements where many of the adults in the Ukraine, where adults were asleep or keeping watch, and they did the same. No one could see these elves as they entered because they were wearing invisible suits. And everyone was absolutely surprised when they discovered these awesome packages. The adults could simply not explain these miracles to their kids, what miracles they were. Santa's sleighs made similar trips to Afghanistan as much of the country slept, bringing lots of joy to less fortunate boys and girls, hundreds of thousands of less fortunate boys and girls. And the elves had entered homeless shelters, spreading packages among the sleeping ones, and even had managed to avoid detection from those who were awake. What marvelous work! 1 minute, those who were awake would hear a gentle rustle. Then presto, the packages would appear like magic. No one could explain this. The slaves and their helpers, or the helpers and their slaves, repeated these trips across the African continent, across South America, to China, India, and Pakistan, and to literally every corner of the world. And then it was time for them to hurry back to base, where Santa was waiting anxiously for their return. And that was the scene at the present time. Part 10. Some Day at Christmas. Jamie and Mallory had finished on cue, and Santa had sent them their cue to finish their performance. As soon as the last sleigh had returned to base, just as they had entered the property of the three wise men, the mermaids had slipped out undetected. So they had entered the property undetected and had exited the property undetected. They moved softly and quickly in their special land shoes, leaving a household of mesmerized dogs and folks. They headed for the shore, where they noiselessly entered the cool water of the sea. And they quickly dived below the placid surface, where the temperature was much warmer. Before they dived, however, Jamie and Mallory gave thumbs-up signals to Snowcone and his team, and waved to Sequin and his dolphin team. Both teams then relayed it to Santa that all was well, and that the mermaids were now on their way back to base. The mermaids swam quickly, but after about an hour or so, they stopped at one of their stations for some rest and relaxation, where other mermaids were waiting to provide them with refreshment, and then they rested and slept for a few hours. They needed their rest, and then they were on their way again back to their own very secret hideaway, where Santa had left very special presents for each of them. Someday at Christmas, as Santa would later reflect, wide-eyed kids from around the world awoke to very special presents, filled with all kinds of toys, and adults could not believe their eyes when they found packages, overstuffed packages, loaded with all kinds of things and foodstuff that would last them for a very, very long time. Warm winter clothes and summer garments, all kinds of things. They could not believe their eyes. Water and electricity were restored to those spots around the world that were being hard hit by war. Folks in the Ukraine and Afghanistan could not believe what had happened overnight, and they could not explain why it had happened. War seemed to have disappeared, and houses and buildings and every other type of construction seemed to have been restored to pre-war conditions. And across Africa, starvation seemed to have been magically erased. And the folks in South America could not believe their eyes when they found themselves being inundated with tons and tons of food, clothes, and everything else. And then there were those electronic or eloquent electronic toys and games. The world was too stunned to explain it all. But far away, the three wise men had heard the news, and with great resentment they knew what had happened. Once more, they had failed to stop Santa and his friends. Santa had once again outsmarted them and had brought Christmas to the world. And this was the scene as the world woke to tons and tons of all kinds of things that they could not believe or understand had happened. Part 11. Special Messages. Not one world leader could have taken credit for these special incidents that had taken place. These were being referred to as unexpected miracles, and even they had to eat humble pie and get into the spirit of things. For one special day in their lives, they found themselves sending special Christmas greetings to each other. Enemy leaders sent special messages and greetings to each other. The Pope shook his head in disbelief. Britain's King Charles would later disclose that his late mom, Queen Elizabeth II, had left him a confidential letter predicting that this would take place, and had sternly instructed him not to open this letter on this particular Christmas day. Now he was proudly sharing this prediction with the rest of the world, showing off his late mom's letter. And for one special day, even the bad guys were stunned into doing nothing, standing and sitting wherever they were. Guns fell silent. Drones and missiles remained on the ground, and soldiers on opposite sides saluted each other across frozen battlefields. Presidents and prime ministers relaxed with their families, and rulers and dictators did the same. Kings and queens dined with their loved ones, and even thugs and gang members took time to enjoy a day where the world was at peace. All was at peace within the animal kingdom. Fishes of the sea frolicked and swam around leisurely. Birds of the air sat in trees singing sweetly. Bees and butterflies ate pollen from flowers, enjoying themselves. Wolves, lions, tigers, elephants, and other animals of the animal kingdom greeted each other warmly, and all was well for every creature, every man, every woman, and every child. Oh, what a day! And Santa had simply outdone himself. And as he looked around at his monitors in his gigantic office, he had been able to see that his handiwork had paid off in grand style. Oh, how he wished that this could have lasted for much more than a day. He knew only too well that good things could not last for too long. That was the scene on this special day around the world. Part 12. All's well that ends well. Kris Kringle relaxed on his beach with his friends, while his chefs prepared a sumptuous buffet. Josh Reisman spent time with his family, and those faithful friends, Marco and Nicholas, spent happy times with their wives, their kids, their friends, and citizens of Bobbin Square. At supper that night, Nicholas and his wife Jane had delivered some exciting news to the gathering. Jane was going to have a baby in the spring of next year, and they knew that it was going to be a boy, and they will name the baby Little Marco, after their friend Marco Sumner. Everyone cheered, and then little Nick smiled and says very easily, "Now we will have a little Nick and a little Marco." The end. I hope you enjoyed this story for today. I hope it helps to bring cheer, peace, and joy to everyone who listens to it, because this is the aim of my stories. I hope you enjoyed it all, and I look forward to presenting you with my next episode, episode 3. Stay tuned. You guys have a great day, a great evening wherever you are, and happy holidays, happy Christmas to everybody. Bye now.